Hi everybody, and welcome to Filled My Head, the channel where we explain data to help answer questions that people ask. Or maybe they didn't ask, but we did. Today we're taking a look at where not to live. This is the second of a two-parter on where not to live if you want to stay dry. In the prior episode, which is linked in the notes, we looked at one-day rainfall records in metropolitan statistical areas in the United States. There are, of course, other ways to gauge staying dry, but I used that statistic first as it represents flood likelihood, among other things, and I can tell you based on where I live that nobody who deals with a flood once ever wants anything to do with them again. We could also look at total annual rainfall to determine where to stay dry, but many of the same MSAs, including New Orleans, Houston, Miami, and New York City, would just be replays from part 1. Besides, if it all falls at once, you are still dry most of the time. Unless you're on the Gulf Coast, then you're sweating into your shorts most of the year. We decided to look at a different stat, and that is the number of average days with some form of measurable precipitation, including snow and sleet. We looked at MSAs again and did so to prevent this from becoming a list of cities in the Pacific Northwest or upstate New York, though there's only so much that can be done about the regional properties of rainfall. I also set the bar for MSAs to be included. They have to have an estimated population of more than 200,000 people. My sincerest apologies to places like Longview, Washington, Corvallis, Oregon, and Ithaca, New York. You're awesome for people who love a gray day, and you're poison to folks who want to stay dry, but there are just not enough of you in those towns to qualify them for inclusion. If you're all expecting to see Seattle, Washington, and Portland, Oregon, spoiler alert up front. They were close to making the list, and they're really close in total rain days to each other, but they missed the list by a few spots. Our data comes from the NOAA datasets linked in the notes. There's more than 15,000 data points to sift through once we sorted everything out. The data is based on averages from 1991 to 2020, so this is the most recent data. Where possible, we tried to grab a data point from an airport, and if one wasn't available, we just grabbed random data points from the area. There may be a collection point elsewhere in these metro areas that received a few more or a few less rainy days on average over 30 years, but I'm not splitting hairs. When you hear the counts for total rain days in this list, I'm pretty sure you're going to agree with the validity of the approach for calling out places to avoid if you don't like rain. With that said, let's get wet. You'll dry out, we promise. Olympia, Lacey, Tumwater, Washington. With 163.4 days of precipitation, it's safe to say that the capital of Washington isn't a place to stay dry. You would have an easier time staying dry in a car wash. Olympia is a nice city, but geez. Avoid some vitamin deficiencies and order up some sunshine, Olympia residents. Putting this another way, over the last 30 years of data points, this MSA has seen about 13.4 years of rain. No thanks. Binghamton, New York. My youngest daughter looked at SUNY Binghamton as an undergrad option. Nice town, and it was a compelling choice for consideration as the SUNY system has a lot of good schools, including Binghamton, but precipitation's a big thing here. With 164.1 days of annual precip, you aren't going to want to leave the galoshes at home. I used that word in the first part as well. Galoshes. I love it. Don't go to college here if being dry is something you're interested in. Just don't. But visit when it's dry, though. I mean, Binghamton and the surrounding areas are really quite nice. Buffalo, Niagara Falls. Buffalo and Niagara Falls are more than just a pair of waterfalls and a bunch of snow. It rains here as well. In total, the area sees 165.8 days of precip. If you're keeping tabs, that's a lot. I mean, a whole lot. You might be able to stay drier running through a sprinkler on a summer day. Still, if you don't want to live there, go for a visit, and not just the Canadian side of Niagara Falls. I mean, I have a fair number of Canadian friends, and they're awesome, but show us Americans some love too. Get some wings while you're here. Yummy. Erie, Pennsylvania. If you're not aware of Erie, Pennsylvania, it can be found on the shore of Lake Erie. We wonder if they named it because of the lake. Wouldn't that be cool? I mean, maybe it's because 166.9 days of precip is just kind of eerie? I don't know. Some days you could stay drier in a filled bathtub. Maybe. This is a lot of wet. And this is not the place for you if you dream of desert landscapes and sunny skies. Bremerton, Silverdale, Port Orchard, Washington. Hey, another Pacific Northwest location. Who would have guessed? I went to grad school in the Pacific Northwest, and it's gray and rainy, so when an MSA from the area appears, I am the least surprised human being in the world. With 167.1 days of precip, Bremerton is pretty wet. You can stay drier in a sauna. It makes up for it by being a pretty nice place. The area is located just across Puget Sound from Seattle, behind Bainbridge Island. Go visit, but call ahead and see if it's one of the days where it isn't raining. There are a few of those, and you'll know them by the throngs of people outdoors who called in sick to work. Youngstown, Warren, Broadman, Ohio. I've only been to Ohio a couple of times, and both times I was there, it was bright and sunny, and it was Cincinnati. But then I was like, hey, Youngstown is between Cleveland and Pittsburgh, and neither of those cities finished very far down the list, so I shouldn't be shocked. At 168 days of precip, Youngstown is not the place to be if you aren't in the mood for some damp in your camp. I have friends and family in Ohio, so maybe next time I'm there, I'll go take an outdoor shower in Youngstown. If you are from the area, let us know in the notes when the weather tends to be nice. Seriously, there has to be a time. Rochester, New York. The only thing that surprised me here was that Rochester wasn't number one. When I looked at some other data sources, I thought it might be, but it really isn't even a close race. Don't get me wrong, at 168.2 days with precip, it's plenty worth avoiding if you want to stay dry, but there are worse places. 3 to be exact. Well, 4 if you lower the threshold to MSAs with over 100,000 people. You know what? I have been an avid photographer for a very long time, so I have some positive associations with Rochester. Go visit anyway, even if it is wet. Bellingham, Washington. At just over 230,000 residents, Bellingham was the closest to the population cutoff on this list. It earned its keep, though, with 168.5 days of precip. This is a really beautiful part of the country, and Bellingham is an easy drive to Vancouver in British Columbia, or even down to Everett. But you're going to get rained on, frequently. And it won't be a heavy rain, but you could theoretically stay drier in Bellingham Bay. Don't live here if you want to stay dry. But phone ahead to see if it's nice and then go visit. Seriously, there's a lot to do in Washington, and it is really, really beautiful. Well, mudslides aren't beautiful, but there are other things to see, we promise. Syracuse, New York. Syracuse. Great university and lots of moisture. Syracuse is moist. You would be drier if you zip down a slip and slide. 173.7 days of year of moisture gets picked up from Lake Ontario and dumped on Syracuse. Well, not really. That isn't really how the water cycle works. I mean, there isn't a giant ladle, but you get the idea. It's wet almost half the year. Bring an umbrella, a good raincoat, and some waterproof winter gear. There were over 15,000 weather stations to sift through to get a picture of this data. Thankfully, we wrote some code and built some tools because otherwise this episode would not have happened. We did double check some of the data, as it really contradicts other online sources, but as those sources also quote NOAA tools, albeit with older data, we're sticking to what we found. We're aware that there are some border cases, but I think we can all agree that if you want to stay dry, the prior 9 listings suck bad enough to where cities and towns that are nearby can be overlooked. If you watched part 1 of this two-parter, and if you haven't, go do that. We'll wait. The magic of the internet means I won't even sense that I'm waiting. That's really cool. Now that everybody has watched that one, the number 1 was so ridiculously in another league from the other 9 as to render the other 9 in a category of other. I'm not sure that's happened again with today's number 1, but with an extra 22 days of rain over the number 2 spot, it certainly merits an eyebrow raise. The number 1 spot belongs to Eugene and Springfield, Oregon. This MSA of nearly 400,000 people has a uniquely crappy data point on the list. It is the only MSA listed with more days with measurable precipitation than without, a whopping 195.3 days. For those who have lived in the Pacific Northwest as I have, you know this is all relative, as many days are completely gray and overcast, even if a drop never falls. But that really doesn't help if the reason you want to stay dry is because you love seeing that shiny glowing orb in the sky. You would have an easier time avoiding getting wet if you were jumping off a diving board into a pool. With water in it, of course. If it was empty, there would be something else making you wet. Our mission at Filled My Head is to help people understand the world better by making data simpler to comprehend. Thanks for showing up today and bringing your curiosity. No data sources are perfect, but all data sources used that we can link are linked in the notes below. So go explore. FilledMyHead.com is launching in early 2022, so keep an eye out. We will be bringing a lot more info to the website, including expanded lists, infographics, and enhanced articles that dig into the how, what, and why behind the subjects we look into. Leave a comment or suggestion for more episodes, say hi, like and subscribe, and don't forget to click the bell icon so you know when more content is posted. There's a lot more content to come, so check back regularly. Thanks.